Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wes Vernon, a longtime friend of Accuracy in Media. And as we get underway for our awards ceremony, I'd like to say a few words about the founding father of Accuracy in Media. Reed Irvine was a man in whose honor tonight's awards are bestowed, is largely responsible for the fact that today we have people in the media who are more willing and able to pierce the one-sided leftist conventional wisdoms that once dominated what we call the mainstream media. Now, some of you younger people, if you think it's difficult today to break that barrier, and let me say, we are nowhere near completed what we need to do in order to get things right in the media. We just barely got a foot in the door compared to what we had 40, 50 years ago. And when I came here in 1968 to this town, conservatism just didn't exist as far as the media was concerned. There were conventional wisdoms and might as well have been from Mars as far as anybody with a conservative outlook was concerned. We had Human Events, of course, in National Review, but that was about it. Fulton Lewis Jr., the famous conservative radio commentator, had died a couple of years earlier. Out on the West Coast, we had George Putnam with his TV commentary. And in Raleigh, North Carolina, we had Jesse Helms with his TV commentary. That was years long before he became a senator. And if you really stop to look back and think about it, it was a scandal. It was a scandal. It was like something out of George Orwell, because here you had the freest nation on earth, the America that the rest of the world looked to for guidance, the people who yearned for freedom. And we had our own media locked in to one point of view, a propaganda point of view. It was really as scandalous as anything in the media that I can think of. As a matter of fact, ironically, if it had been a scandal that involved anybody but the media would have been all over it, investigating it. Now, in 1969, Reed Irvine started Accuracy in Media at a time when that very phrase was sort of an oxymoron. And at the time that he did it, he never dreamed, I'm sure he never dreamed, that someday there'd be a Rush Limbaugh, a Mark Levin, a Chris Plant, or whatever, or that we'd have an Andrew Breitbart who could pierce the armor of an all-powerful Hollywood and live to tell about it, or Marc Morano, who served honorably and effectively with Senator Jim Inhofe, and then began his climatedepot.com, where he was able to reach millions, and continue day by day to expose the biggest fraud of the late 20th and early 21st centuries, so-called man-made global warming. Reed was an intelligent, well-educated person. He didn't need to start this. He certainly didn't need, it's not as if he led a life where he didn't have anything else to do. He was a respected, well-educated economist with the Federal Reserve Board. He didn't need this gig, but he saw what needed to be done. He was a professional person who couldn't help go on noticing the fact that the American people were being denied information to which a free people were entitled. Well past time, and in fact, he figured it was well past time to demand some answers as to why, and hold some people accountable. Now, Reed understood, of course, as we all know, that there's more than one way of lying to the public. You can do it by telling an outright falsehood, a blatant lie, or you can do it by looking the other way, and really a lot of it is what you don't say. And that's one of the biggest scandals of the media, probably bigger than the outright lies. So instead of sitting at home shouting at his TV set, Reed decided to do something, and that's how we got Accuracy in Media. Now, one of the first things he did after, and this is what they continue today to do, AIM does, Reed bought stock for AIM in some of the largest media corporations so that he could show up at shareholders' meetings and, shall we say, call to account the proverbial emperors with no clothes. Now, one thing that Reed understood, came to understand very soon, if he didn't understand it already, is that something that every investigative reporter already knew. And Reed, by the way, did the investigative reporters' work for them. The media, he did the work, the job, the shoe leather work that the media, the mainstream media, did not do. And so he found out that he not only had to fight off the cover-up operations of the people he was investigating, the targets of his investigations, he also had to fight off the media whose work he was doing, the work they should have been doing. So he had a double job on his hands. He actually fought those who, in some ways, they were actively participating in, if not covering up, the wrongdoing, the misguided approach of the mainstream media. Now, for those of you who didn't know Reed, he was, in every sense, a gentleman. Reed Irvine was a gentleman not only in his professional work, but also in his unassuming manner. He was larger than life, but he was not a self-promoter. I mean, he just simply sat down in a methodical way and studied the facts and saw what was not being reported versus what was going on. And of course, we should say that at one time in his youth, Reed himself was a left-winger, but I think there were several experiences, and not the least of which is his job with the Fed got him to appreciate how the market works and what is realistic and what is not. Not in personality. He didn't resemble this person I'm about to cite in his personality, but certainly in tenacity. He was sort of like the Lieutenant Columbo of the old TV series. What you do is you ask the right questions, keep on asking the perfectly innocent, logical questions until you get to the last one. Your opponent thinks he's got you buffaloed, and you said, oh, by the way, and then he would pin them down often at the shareholders' meetings, which AIM still attends, by the way, in the person of Cliff Kincaid, who was mentored by Reed. Oh, by the way, he would infuriate. His calm persistence would infuriate some of the biggies in the media, not the least of which was Ben Bradlee, the legendary editor of the Washington Post. In fact, he once sat down and wrote Reed a letter in which he referred to him as a miserable, carping, retromidgent, I'm trying to get through this. I have a hard time every time. Retromidgent vigilante. Now, my own dictionary doesn't even find the word retromidgent in it. I had to do a Google search, and I found it. Reed, as I remember, he did find it, but they didn't have the net. We didn't have the network, the internet then, so he wasn't able to get it quite that quickly. But he did find the definition. It's the definition I found, and as I recall, it's the same one Reed did. An animal urinating backward because of body configuration. Now, I submit that when one of the leading figures in the all-powerful media takes the time to sit down and put that in writing to one of his critics, you know that that critic has hit pay dirt, as Reed often did. Now, there was another time when Reed crossed swords with a protege of Drew Pearson. Some of you young people may have heard of Drew Pearson. He was a gossip monger, if ever there was one, sort of a poor man's Walter Winchell. And about 3 years ago, I interviewed Bob Novak, who, rest in peace, passed away just last year. But at that time, Bob was just about to release his memoirs of his 50 years here in Washington. And one of the things I asked him, going back over 50 years' time, I said, "What did you think of Drew Pearson?" And Bob said, "Oh, boy, was he good." He said he'd come up with some of the biggest scoops. He said he just blew this town over. He was just absolutely, he really nailed them. He says there's just one little thing, one little problem. They weren't true. So, this gives you an idea of what Reed was up when he went to do battle with somebody who had been schooled at the knee of Drew Pearson into what journalism was. This person wrote columns accusing Reed of maybe being influenced by the CIA, that the CIA was out to destroy the media, and that Reed was doing their bidding. This was at a time of the Frank Church and Otis Pike hearings in the post-Watergate period, when the CIA was really being emasculated, and we're suffering for that even today. But nevertheless, this columnist decided to go a step further, and he managed to persuade a liberal congressman, Wright Patman of Texas, to hold a hearing. That supposedly Reed was using his office and government time and resources at the Fed to do AIM business. Well, that was just absolutely not only penny ante, it was trumped up, it was garbage. And so by the time the hearing had gotten underway, before just a little while, Patman just decided, I don't know what this guy's gotten me into, but Reed, Irvine, had made a monkey out of his accuser. Not only that, but a whole line of really important people in Washington, people who really carried some weight, were lined up to testify as to Reed's integrity. And that's another thing with Reed. This has carried him through as much as anything. Not only was he bright, he had a steel-trap mind, but he absolutely adhered to the letter of the law of integrity all the way through. And many of the people he targeted didn't live by the same standard, and that was one factor in the fact that they, more often than not, in fact, usually came out second best. There are other heroes besides Reed, of course, in the fact that we have a better media today, although much yet to be desired, a better media today than we did back in the days when Reed launched Accuracy in Media. We could cite Ronald Reagan for the fact that he vetoed an act of Congress, a bill that would have embedded the FCC's fairness doctrine into the law of the land, for example. But a lot of the stuff that we see going on today that's positive in the media, you can trace it back to the pioneering work that Reed Irvine did. And so, as we prepare to honor tonight's awardees, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the current chairman of AIM, Don Irvine.
I think we still have a few seats here and there if you want to squeeze in. Appreciate everyone coming tonight, this afternoon for this event. It's always hard to follow Wes. Wes is kind of our resident historian of the media and of accuracy in media. And so we don't compare notes, so I don't know what he's going to say beforehand. So he usually winds up taking half my talk, which is probably better for you. But I really do appreciate what Wes said about my father. For those of you who knew him, I think you would understand that Wes was, as far as I'm concerned, my own personal bias, he was dead on target. My father definitely was a very modest man. He was a man of integrity, and he loved this country. He was a great patriot. And he really kind of traversed the stream of having come from a background of growing up in the 1920s, 1930s, really being heavily influenced by socialists in college when he was at the University of Utah, professors, big surprise that there were actually, academia was shifting left even then. And to see him change over the years, I came along, far later in his life than he probably expected in that sense. But he had really turned, and just really changed. By the time I was born, by the time I grew up, he was, a diehard patriot, anti-communist, and a conservative in every word, and someone who really loved his country and wanted to see only the best for his children and his grandchildren. Wes mentioned the episode with Ben Bradley, and that's one of our favorite stories to tell and retell, and we'll probably just do this every single year because we just get such a thrill out of it. But the other part of that story too is when that letter came out, it was such a shock to us. We thought, well, we'll send that out to our members, and we reproduced the letter in our newsletter and sent that out to our members, and they loved that. And years ago, probably I think it was about 1989 or thereabouts, we formed, when AIM had its 20th anniversary, we formed the Miserable Carping Regimented Vigilante Society. And it was a lot of fun. It wasn't really a fundraiser. We actually had a whole scroll thing and all these. Someone in our office had the bright idea, and it may have been Debbie Lambert that had done this, is that to actually give an honorary membership in the society to Ben Bradley. At the time, we had Joe Golden was working for us, and Joe was actually going to an event where Ben Bradley was speaking. So Ben got this hand-delivered to him about the next day or so after all of these things transpired. We received that honorary scroll in the mail a day later with a note scribbled at the top that he could not accept this immense honor. Part of it was that, as he had said, he always hated having that brought up. There was an episode we had with Cy Hirsch years ago with the New York Times, and during this long article, right in there somewhere was he just talking about my father and AIM in that letter. He says, he just kind of wish I never had written that letter. He says, I don't know how much money I've raised for AIM. They just use it as a fundraiser. Those are the days that where he definitely regretted saying those things. But when my father was asked about his impact, of AIM's impact on the media several years ago, he said, the greatest contribution that we and other critics have made is that the public is more sophisticated now, and that there's much more skepticism of the media, and a great deal less tendency to accept what the media are saying, taking it at face value, and maybe that's a good thing. And now we know that things have changed a great deal. The media, the American public is much more media savvy. Today, I consider this as the age of Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, a very fast-paced, very mobile society now. I know that there's a lot of tweets going on at this conference. It has gotten to the degree now that for a lot of people, even in the media, they use Twitter and Facebook as a substitute for watching television news or reading the newspaper. So this is becoming the new substitute as we continue to see the newspaper industry, the whole media industry continue to change and evolve. Now, a year ago, when we were gathering here and we gave this award out, things were a little bit different in the political climate. Now, we've talked about this all day long, as you've heard at all the speeches that have been given. President Obama had only been in office for a little over a month. His poll ratings were sky high. The Democrats were dancing in the streets, just could not wait to implement their radical agenda. So where are we now? We've got a guy, as Mitt Romney said, who's sliding downhill faster than Lindsey Vonn. The Democrats are retiring and leaving Congress in droves, and their agenda is in tatters. So we have seen a big sea change just in the last year. And that has been a result of the kind of the social media wave, a lot of the anger that's been built up, but it surely hasn't been as a result of the mainstream media, which has been continuing to try to prop up the Obama agenda, but obviously they're not been succeeding lately. The mainstream media loves to report on things that they like, healthcare reform, card check, you name it, net neutrality. But if it's things that they don't like the collapse of all the global warming issues going on out there, all the science and all the statistics, how much do you hear about that? Very little. And so there are things like that that happen. And that's why we have come here tonight, really, to honor two very great men. Now, before I go on with this, I have to say, this meeting has attracted the attention of the media, and particularly of the left. And we have our favorite little lefty who loves AIM. You know, Cliff knows this, Terry Kreppel of Conweb Watch. And so he's already put out a little missive today about our awards ceremony, which I'm sure, I know Mark, I think, has already seen. I don't know if Andrew's seen it. But reacting to the press release we issued earlier, they said here, we've detailed how Morano has repeatedly lied and misled in his attacks on global warming, and Breitbart has forwarded numerous false and misleading claims in pushing what AIM calls his groundbreaking investigation into rampant corruption at Acorn. AIM is honoring the antithesis of its name. That is how depraved and irrelevant AIM has become. Well, I'm sorry, you know, to Terry Kreppel, I wear that with a badge of honor, and I think everybody else in here should as well. Where is Terry?
You know, if Terry's here, I'll give him a hug. He needs a hug.
We should show him a little love.
Yeah.
You might regret that.
Well, going back to the mainstream media, back in 2009, we learned just recently, in the latter part of 2009, leading scientists from the University of East Anglia's climatic research unit were caught using tricks to hide the decline in the Earth's temperature over the past several decades. There was a series of emails that were leaked. The researchers even discussed suppressing papers that contradicted their findings. The response from the networks and national newspapers, it was just silence, pretty much dead silence. One of the few to report on the controversy, Andrew Revkin of the New York Times, even tried to spin the story to downplay accusations against his friends in the CRU. Fortunately, the new media picked up on the story. Foremost among them, Marc Morano's ClimateDepot.com. Marc's excellent reporting on the ClimateGate scandal exposed the politicized science behind the claims that science has settled on global warming, and the national media finally found themselves forced to take notice. Marc Morano is executive director and chief correspondent for ClimateDepot.com, a global warming and eco news center founded in 2009. He served for 3 years as senior advisor, speechwriter, and climate researcher for U.S. Senator Jim Inhofe, as Wes has mentioned earlier, and managed the award-winning communications operation on the GOP side of the EPW committee. Morano joined the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee as the Majority Communications Director in June 2006, after a decade and a half as a working journalist, documentary maker, radio talk show host, and national television correspondent. Tonight, we honor his tireless efforts to inform the public about the ClimateGate scandal and his courage in challenging the myth that the science is settled on man-made global warming. Marc, on behalf of AIM, I want to present you with a 2010 Reed Irvine Accuracy Media Award for Grassroots Journalism.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all. Of course, thank Accuracy in Media for this Reed Irvine Award. I got the opportunity to know Reed for years. In fact, one of the first people in Washington that I worked with, Reed. I was doing videos for him. I did a lot of projects for Accuracy in Media in the early days. And later, as an inspiration, went to work for Media Research Center, which was, would never have been possible without Reed Irvine's groundbreaking work. I really appreciate this award. So many people are behind this, and one of them actually is in the room. Craig Rucker of CPAC is here, who's the company that runs Climate Depot right there. So there's Craig Rucker, who made all this possible. But it's when you look at this whole global warming issue, and when it began basically in 1988, and where we are today, and how this award, by the way, the Accuracy of Media is giving is possible, it is stunning. In 1988, the United Nations Climate Panel was formed. That was the end of science and the beginning of politics when it came to the atmosphere. And it was pretty grim business all the way up until pretty much 2008, when things really started to turn. But even when I joined the Senate in 2006, it was amazing because everyone was at their high point, but they had already put the seeds of their own destruction in. They chose, God knows why, they had two spokesmen for their cause. The United Nations, which the American people institutionally distrust, and Al Gore, one of the most divisive, political figures in American history. A man who, the closest presidential election, you're going to put him up as your spokesman. Someone who claims there's no debate, someone who's essentially arrogant, won't debate anyone, who as early as 1992 declared the science was settled. Well, Al Gore was the seeds of their own destruction, because by putting him as the face in the United Nations, you were never going to get more than at most half the American people to support your cause. And if I was a PR person advising the global warming movement, I would have said, you're using the UN and Al Gore? Are you nuts? And of course, it worked for a while. They had the Oscars for his film Inconvenient Truth. You had the Nobel Peace Prize shared by the UN and Al Gore. They were riding high in 2007. It was called the gold standard of scientific review. They were high-fiving. The deniers were thrown into the ash heap of history. We were compared to Holocaust deniers. And then something started happening. And I credit Gallup News Organization with this. By early 2008, the Gallup poll editor came out and said, well, something's going on here. The more we're talking about global warming, the more Oscars are given, the more Nobel Peace Prize are given, the more ABC News Bill Blakemore, the more CNN pounds the alarm, the public are growing more and more skeptical. And this started in 2008, and it just kept continuing and continuing to the point where the fall of 2009, more Americans believed in haunted houses than man-made global warming. And I'm not making that up. Science wins in the end. And this is before ClimateGate. And I don't know, it's incredible timing. Again, thanks CPAC for making this possible. Thank AIM for this award. But when I started Climate Depot in March of 2009, it was the equivalent of starting an anti-communist website in March of 1989. And then in November, the Berlin Wall falls. I'd love to take credit for it, but, but it was good timing. But going right now, it is just, the entire movement is in tatters. It has literally been exposed as subprime science, subprime economics, subprime politics. The bubble has burst. There's no other way to put it. Across the board, even Katie Couric, CBS News, is covering this, questioning the UN conferences. The New York Times is being forced to do a little bit of coverage. The UK media deserves actually probably the best award coverage, whether it's the UK Guardian, UK Times, UK Telegraph. They have been pounding this on a daily basis while the American media remains silent. So there's much more work for accuracy in media to do to pound the American media. They're going to eventually have to cover it. But what they're going to try to do is scapegoat it. There's going to be some resignations, and they're going to say, well, now we're reforming it. But you can't get past the basic science. I have a quick PowerPoint I want to run through here of some of the absurdities as this movement utterly and completely collapses around them. And one of the things that happened when I joined the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee in 2006, by the way, I'd worked for Rush Limbaugh from 1992 to 1996 as his man in Washington. And they were talking, Wes and Don were talking about the media back then. I would go to events in Washington, and the media, the Democrat politicians and their staff would have no fear of the media in 1992, 1993, 1994. And that quickly changed years later, but they had no fear of the media because the media wasn't aggressive. You go up to Republican politicians with a press pass, and they'd be like, who are you with? I don't want to talk to the media, because Republicans were bashed. All you had were the three networks, PBS and CNN. Well, by the time, in 1992, Paul Weyrich launched America's Voice, or NET, and then Fox News came online in 2006. By the time 2000 came around, and now moving to 2010, now you go to Washington, and it's the Democrats running scared of the media because the new media has taken over. So this was all started by Reed Irvine in 1969. And it was amazing to witness that sea change here. And again, in 1993, the Clinton White House seized my television camera for Rush Limbaugh, the television show. And that got the ire even of Helen Thomas, the dean of the White House press corps, who marched me into the White House press office, demanded they return the camera, and the White House later apologized. But and Helen Thomas had said in the history of the White House, she had been covering it, I think, since at least Abraham Lincoln, or no, all right, just an age joke there. But she'd been covering it maybe since Eisenhower or JFK. And no president had ever seized any television equipment like that. Not even the hated Richard Nixon, who they referred to as King Richard. But Bill Clinton did, and actually ABC News and NBC News actually covered it. Andrea Mitchell, just to show the shock. But it's an indication of, even back then, what? There's opposition media in the White House? Take his camera. I mean, that's the level of of how far we've come since 1993. But as I mentioned, the Berlin Wall, that's where we are right now. This is scientific freedom. This is the United Nations being exposed again and again and laughed at, all the upper echelon. The ClimateGate scandal was the United Nations climate scandal because all those scientists were all top leaders in the United Nations. But here's what I like to do in the presentation to people on global warming. All you need to know about the science of global warming is this quote. Global warming cap and trade, the most significant revenue-generating proposal of our time. That was in the Washington Post, Ben Cardin. That has been the underpinning. It's a political movement. It is not a scientific movement. How absurd have they become? This was last summer. Democrat Senator Debbie Stabenow. Global warming creates volatility. I feel it when I'm flying. The storms are more volatile. Actual quote. And now we have Tom Friedman of the New York Times saying, let's not call it global warming. Gee, is that because it's not warming anymore? Or is that because, so he calls it global weirding. So now anything that happens, they can declare it global warming. Here's another way that science has been perverted. Nobel Prize winning economists, yet to find ways to exaggerate the threat. Here's a tornado destroying a house. How desperate are they? Mainstream publication. He wishes over the next 5 or 10 years, horrid things could happen. Tornadoes in the Midwest. That would get people concerned about climate change. They've reached a level of desperation, again, before ClimateGate, before all these recent scandals. This is last summer. I like to say the global warming movement was dead before ClimateGate hit. All ClimateGate did was withhold the embalming fluid, and now the corpse is rotting for us all to see. This is David Bellamy, classic example, a UK scientist, big believer in global warming, reversed himself about 2005 when all the ice core data and new scientific information came. His new line is, the science has quite simply gone awry. This was a believer who became a skeptic. It's not even science, it's anti-science. When you have people wishing for death and destruction on their fellow Americans through tornadoes, that's anti-science. Some of the other honors. I thank Accuracy in Media, but I also got some other honors here. The Rolling Stone magazine, Climate Depot, they named me one of the 17 climate killers, one of the planet's worst enemies. And they called me Essential Cell, the denial machine. Again, the reference to the Holocaust. That was Greenpeace. But the media, led by Rolling Stone, a couple other outlets, ABC's Bill Blakemore, Scott Pelley of 60 Minutes, who openly won't interview any scientist skeptical of global warming because he said it'd be the equivalent of interviewing a Holocaust denier if he was doing a segment on the Holocaust. This is the level of media we still have. He's still considered their top CBS climate correspondent. These are just some of the more honors named 5 criminals against humanity. All of these phrases they put in to seek intimidation. And this is what we found out in the ClimateGate emails. But there's Mother Nature fighting back. Here's a picture of the Capitol. And wait, what are those people doing? Are those protest signs? Whoa, big DC snowstorm greets largest public protest of global warming ever. We had a blizzard hit the UN conference in Copenhagen. My favorite headline, Pelosi snowed out of DC global warming rally. We call it the Gore effect. Just so you know, the United Nations, these are some of the comments. The climate bill leads to global governance. We talked about the taxes. We have international bean counters, bureaucrats, chomping at the bit to regulate CO2. Because if you regulate CO2, you control everything in life. Remember what I said about the science and we talked about the economics? Well, here's Timothy Wirth, 1988. Even if the theory is wrong, we're doing the right thing in terms of economic and environmental policy. In other words, we knew decades ago, to hell with the science. It's all about what their politics were and what their ideology was and what regulations they wanted. They didn't care about the science. This is amazing. This guy's a huge global warming believer, but he knows that the movement's solutions, most of the green stuff, verging on a gigantic scam. And this is a believer in global warming. So even the warmest believers are disgusted by the practices of the solution people that come around in Washington. You know it's bad when John McCain is bailing out of global warming. He's now claiming, and this is not made up, he just claimed a couple days ago that he didn't even support a global warming bill despite co-authoring 2, one in 2003 and 2005. He's stunned his former aides with his newfound skepticism. That just goes to show you, because of the work of AIM, because of all the work of Senator Inhofe, who I owe a huge debt of gratitude for, he stood on the Senate floor, and thank you, yeah. And Senator Inhofe, who was chairman of the Environment and Public Works Committee until Barbara Boxer took over, stood on the Senate floor and called man-made global warming one of the greatest hoaxes in modern times in 2003. And you know it's now politically expedient to be a skeptic when John McCain is running scared. And it's also worse. Al Franken of Minnesota bailed out on the climate bill last August. Again, before ClimateGate. You know it's bad when Democrats like Al Franken are bailing. How bad is it? Al Gore is met by hundreds of protesters, whether it's in Oregon, Florida. The bloom is off the rose here. It's amazing to watch this. All the local coverage in both cities was all about Gore being booed and chanted, and his silly message was ignored. Here's what I mentioned about more Americans believe in haunted houses. 37% to 36%, according to Gallup. Again, that's scientific progress. The more they try to scare us, the more it grows. But here's what I'll leave you with. The history of failed eco-alarms. We knew there was a global cooling scare in the 70s. We've had overpopulation fears. We've had the chemical fears, Alar apples. We've had all the scares on pesticides. Resource scarcity, people predicting famines. We had the Amazon rainforest scare, which I actually did a documentary in 2000 on the Amazon rainforest. The New York Times, 9 years later, admits for every acre of rainforest cut, 50 are being regenerated. They're calling them galloping jungles. People are leaving the rural areas and in the jungles, going to cities. And they quoted a scientist saying, maybe it wasn't such an urgent cause after all. Well, gee, thanks for telling us after Sting's rainforest concerts, National Geographic specials, Disney films scaring children. But the question is, as global warming collapses, what's the next eco scare? They always have to have one. What's up next at bat? Anyone want to guess? Air? Close. That's a good one. Air is good. Guy's face is blue. No joke. UK Green Party test marketing the next eco scare. There exists a more serious crisis than CO2. Yeah, the oxygen levels, human activity has decreased them by 1/2. This is a test market. They're trying this out. Plastics. Remember The Graduate? Plastics. Lori David, Al Gore's producer. Plastic waste is in some ways more alarming for us humans than global warming. They're already thinking ahead. Tarot cards. Why am I showing you a tarot card? Because we have insane people in high office. Energy Secretary Chu, and that he honestly said this, June 28 of last year, at no other time in the history of science have we been able to say what the future will be 100 years from now. Science is on his shoulder, speaking in his ear. He actually believes this. Imagine if we had a cabinet secretary in 1909 America saying, well, science is telling me what the world's going to be like in 2000. We'll know the climate. We'll know the energy mix of our economy. We'll know all the resource management. He would have been laughed out of 1909 America. Today, he's taken seriously at congressional hearings. I don't understand it. And my reaction was, shouldn't Secretary Chu be touting these predictions and his certainty of the year on a boardwalk with a full deck of tarot cards? That's the level of science he's promoting here. Japanese scientists, man-made climate fear is now akin to ancient astrology. This is one of my favorite quotes, Frank Tipler, a physicist. Whether the ice caps melt or expand, whatever happens, the global warming theorists claim it confirms their theory. A perfect example of a pseudoscience like astrology. And that's where the global weirding comes in. That's where I feel it when I'm flying, Senator Stabenow. This is not a joke. Global warming causing women to become hookers in Africa. Women in her Malawi village are turning to prostitution because they can no longer make enough money from farming due to global warming. UN official, climate change pushes poor women to prostitution. These are their actual quotes. This is what the UN is peddling. And it's funny, but the developing world is being told, because we own SUVs and live a nicer life and we have running water and electricity, that their children are being forced to prostitution because every drought, flood, hurricane, storm, every act of God, we used to call it, but every act of nature is because of man-made global warming. It's a perversion of science. Why is Obama... Okay, wait. This is just an AP photo just to show you the summit from last summer. I don't know. Okay. The video is less damning, although I think Sarkozy was guilty there. Okay. Controlling nature. At that summit where Obama was looking around there, Obama, he backed a historic breakthrough to agree to keep a goal of keeping the world's temperatures from rising no more than 2 degrees Celsius. Do you got that? World leaders, Western leaders, agreed to control the Earth's thermostat. It prompted a UK scientist to say, as if the climate's controlled by a dimmer light switch that can be twiddled up and down at the whim of pompous politicians. At the same time Obama was there at the summit, the tribes in Uganda were blaming calamities like drought on the angry gods. And the All Africa media said, little do these poor villagers know their area is suffering the consequences of a larger problem, climate change. So here's the question. Who needs to be educated? And which is more plausible? Ugandans blaming drought and disease on angry gods, or more educated Western leaders believing they can control the Earth's thermostat? This is the level of absurdity we've reached. It gets more absurd. The same time Obama was pledging to control the Earth's thermostat with the other politicians, naked farm girls were plowing fields in India in an ancient ritual to embarrass weather gods to bring about badly needed monsoon rain. They were chanting hymns to invoke the gods. So the question is, who's more likely to affect and impact the weather, President Obama and Western leaders, or naked farm girls in India? I want to see a vote right now. Who do you think's right? But this is the absurd level. This is where we are right now in climate science, where we actually think politicians can do it. My favorite quote, Richard Lindzen, ordinary people see through man-made climate fears, but educated people are very vulnerable. Now, just more climate astrology. Obama actually said this. My presidency will, quote, be the moment when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal. You ready? Hallelujah, hallelujah. No joke. Global sea level, July, just 8 months into office, flattening a downward trend. In July 22nd, sea level, he did it. Obama called it. He did it. He's got powers and ability far beyond those of ordinary men. Hallelujah. So I'll leave you with this. Have we advanced? I'm showing you witch trials here from the Salem witch trials. During the Salem witch trials, women accused of being witches were accused of changing the weather. Remember, this was during the Little Ice Age, so crop failures, brutal cold, much like the winter we've had here. Have we advanced? This is the Aztec priest. They encouraged people to sacrifice blood to the gods to end severe drought in 1450. Thousands of sacrificed in a few weeks' time. Blame people for the weather. Huh? Does it sound like your SUV is a weather machine? You've caused this. You're causing women to become hookers in Africa? Very familiar. This was 1450. Human sacrifice. Where are the modern human sacrifices? Telling Africans they can't have electricity is immoral. Gore uses more electricity in a week than 28 million Ugandans. Absolutely true stat. Because only 3 million, there's 31 million Ugandans, and I think 3 million have electricity, 28 million have none. In Chad, people can't cook. Their global warming-inspired ban on charcoal leads to desperate families. Cooking is, of course, a fundamental necessity. On the other hand, climate change. Every citizen must protect his environment. That's what their environmental minister said, inspired by the UN. People living in huts made of dung are being told to sacrifice to save the planet, which isn't in danger. Kenyans were rebelling. UK grocery stores, buy local, carbon-friendly. Well, they didn't like that because it was affecting their livelihood and impacting their export of food. India told the United Nations, and by the way, India is breaking away, talking about forming their own climate group independent of the UN. It's morally wrong to reduce emissions when 40% of Indians don't have access to electricity. Think about that. Obama supports limiting development. Obama, who should know better, being a champion of the poor allegedly his whole life as an activist, he is telling the World Bank, don't fund coal-fired plants in the developing countries due to global warming fears. Again, the only way these people can get out of poverty is through coal-fired power plants and carbon-based energy. This is one of my the cartoonists, actually Tim Kelly of CNS News. It's a little bit hard-hitting, but this is it. Al Gore talking to a dying baby. Your carbon light lifestyle is an inspiration. That's the perversion. We can talk about how global warming will cause energy prices here, but that's the morality. When Al Gore says it's a moral issue, it is a moral issue. There it is, right there. Finally, carbon-based economy is one of the greatest liberators of mankind in the history of our planet. Let's not demonize CO2. It's not pollution. Let's laugh at Barbara Boxer the next time she claims it is pollution. Life used to be nasty, brutish, and short, and still is for 1.6 billion people without running water and electricity. They need carbon-based energy. And if we were facing a climate crisis and the proposal of the UN and Congress were only hope, we would literally all be doomed. Because if you look at what the UN proposes and what Congress proposes, they wouldn't even impact global temperature. Assuming they were right on the science, in the case of the congressional bill, it won't even impact global CO2 levels, according to Obama. It's a giant con. That's what they've been selling us. They've been exposed. We should be laughing, celebrating, popping champagne corks as the United Nations is an utter free fall. But we have to keep our keep fighting them now, because now they're going to try to regroup and come back. It's either going to be a new eco scare or they're going to claim some natural disaster. If we have another hurricane hit us, Al Gore is going to jump out of the woodwork and say the deniers were wrong. Look, it's bad. But again, I just want to end here by thanking Accuracy in Media, thanking everyone here who made it possible. I appreciate this award, and thank you. Keep the fight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. It's a hard act to follow for anybody, but I'm sure Andrew's going to be up to it. But as Mark talks, one thing that always runs through my mind, particularly for those of us who live in Washington and just went through those 2 back-to-back snowstorms, is I don't think anybody in D.C. has seen or heard of Al Gore in weeks, if not months, as a result of that. But as my son, we were shoveling the walk, he looked at me and he said, "This is an inconvenient storm." So maybe we ought to be doing a movie with AIM, and let's try that sometime. Well, now it's time to get to our next awardee. In 2009, the national media nearly missed out on one of the most explosive stories of the year. It had all the makings of a great scandal: corruption, prostitution, hypocrisy, cover-up, and misuse of taxpayer money. However, the target was a favored liberal group that had trained Barack Obama himself in community organizing, and the muckrakers, they were conservative journalists, the most distrusted source among the elite media. By now, I'm sure everybody in this room knows the story. Andrew Breitbart's Big Government blog released videos of 2 young journalists, Hannah Giles and James O'Keefe, posing as a prostitute and a pimp, seeking advice from the taxpayer-subsidized Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now, or Acorn. Acorn employees were caught on tape advising the pair on how to hide their illegal activities for maximum tax benefits. Media institutions ignored the scandal, even as government officials rushed to distance themselves from Acorn, and the House of Representatives revoked its funding, even though it was just temporary. The New York Times' own public editor admitted the paper had slow reflexes in dealing with the controversy. Even Jon Stewart of The Daily Show asked, "Where were the real reporters on this story?" Breitbart and his team knew the media would be reluctant to report on the story, but they didn't back down. The truth came out thanks to their persistent efforts. Andrew Breitbart is publisher of the news portals Breitbart.com and Breitbart TV. In January 2009, he launched Big Hollywood, a group blog off of Breitbart.com on Hollywood and politics from the center-right perspective. He gained greater notoriety when his second blog endeavor, Big Government, broke the Acorn prostitution scandal. Breitbart's latest group blog, Big Journalism, launched just this past January. Andrew co-wrote the best-selling attack on celebrity culture, Hollywood Interrupted, and was a primary developer for the Huffington Post. How about that? Tonight we honor his groundbreaking investigation into rampant corruption at Acorn. Andrew, on behalf of AIM, I present you with the Reed Irvine Accuracy in Media Award for Investigative Journalism.
Thank you very much. All right. Not since most improved on my JV baseball team have I received an award, and one terrific. The only thing I know in the world, quite literally, is media bias. So I'm a savant accepting this award on the only thing I know. I want to, for the new media people out there, I want to get it on record. I heart Marc Morano. You have no idea. What we endeavor to do, we whistleblowers and troublemakers out here in the new media who venture forth to attack the mainstream media for its bankruptcy, is to show that neutral media that shows neutrality towards Al-Qaeda and towards terrorists, they actually aren't neutral when it comes to putting a mirror up to who these people are and shining a light on the corruption that is the mainstream media. I got involved in this racket quite accidentally, and I'm kind of not a polite person, but I'm kind of a gregarious, lighthearted person, and I like laughing. I like going out and having cocktails with people. I like going out to dinner with people. And so in what I started to do, I started to go out and have cocktails with the people in the media. And because I was involved in news aggregation, these people wanted to become my friend. I'm like, this is kind of interesting. It's an awkward dance. I'm like, sure. I want to convert these people to not to conservatism. They'll eventually get there if they get to see the facts. I want to hold these people accountable to the standards that they offer at the J School. That is objective journalism. That's what they say, that they go in there and they take their ideology and they leave it at the coat check. Well, that's in fact not true. And as long as these people have symposia in which they discuss everything from Craigslist to ruining their business, but they will not bring up the media bias thing. They go after Bernie Goldberg when he dares to tell the truth about what went on in the newsroom. Isn't it interesting that these people want to protect whistleblowers unless it's a whistleblower against their racket? And their hatred towards anyone that would dare challenge them, they start going to the DSM thing. They start calling you crazy. This person's crazy. Any person that could possibly think that the mainstream media is biased must be criminally insane. When you meet these people, like I do, and you continue to go out and have cocktails with them, maybe you are criminally insane. They're not nice people. They hold people that disagree with them in absolute contempt, and this entire new media creation is flummoxing them because average citizens are starting to do the job that they're supposed to do. If they were doing the job they were supposed to do, people would be getting into knit crafting, Warcraft, like those user-friendly games. Homemakers are now the journalists because they want to raise their country. They want to raise their children in the country that they were, born into, but they realize that they can't because the firewall for truth and accuracy and justice is the mainstream media. After years of going out to cocktails with these people and telling them, you got to change your ways, and watching the beginnings of new media from the Drudge Report through Instapundit, all of these websites, if you distill down all of the success stories of the early new media and Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, all they are is media criticism. All they do is take the source material and prove to you day in and day out that these people are lying to you. And what's happening now is it's reached a critical mass. There's no turning back. There's no turning back on the revelation that this bed of media accuracy and neutrality, it's over. It's crumbled right in front of us. And what has happened in our country over the last year is pretty amazing. It's not just the exposure of Barack Obama being a political radical, which was obvious to anyone who paid attention during the campaign to the alternative media, but what has happened, and I almost feel sorry for the left. I'm not kidding. I almost feel sorry for them because their entire political philosophy is crumbling right now because of exposure of what Marc Morano has done on ClimateGate. That is one of the primary pillars of their moral superiority, is their fundamental belief in global warming. And so and their fundamental belief that science, to prove that the science was wrong and to show that their religion was false is devastating to these people. And to prove that their moral righteousness in their place as the fourth estate in our society, it's been devastating to them that we expose them, that they act in bad faith, and they act in bad faith against the American people. And so we finally had enough of it. I'm going to just show you what I had to deal with today. Kate Zernicki of the New York Times, are you in the room? Are you in the room? You're despicable. You're a despicable human being. You're the New York Times. What is your headline here? You came to CPAC to get your prey, and here's your prey, Jason Matera from Hot Air and also from Young America's Foundation. This is the headline: CPAC speaker bashes Obama, comma, in racial tones. How can conservatives win the youth vote that overwhelmingly went for Barack Obama in 2008? At the Conservative Political Action Conference, apparently, some are betting on using racial stereotypes. It goes into a story that does not express that he used a racial stereotype. It is just built upon a bed of lies. It says that he went into a Chris Rock voice. She's the one that correlated his voice to Chris Rock. He happens to be from Brooklyn. He was using his voice. But this is what these creeps do. I'm sick of having cocktails with them. I'm now at war with them. No more cocktails. I predicted this every step of the way in the Acorn story, that the left has basically 2 or 3 templates when it deals with the majority of the people in this country, the people in the flyover states. Why do I refer to flyover states? Because I grew up liberal in Brentwood and the west side of Los Angeles with a sense of moral superiority that I was better than everybody. And then I went to college in the South, and I was like, you're so smart. Your brother's smart. Your mother's smart. I'm like, oh, and then I'd met people throughout the dorm, and I was like, this is a really weird conspiracy to put all these smart people from flyover states in one dorm. I was like, and I came back to Los Angeles. I was like, I live in the weirdest dorm you'll ever meet. There are these people from flyover country. You know those stupid people that you make movies about and you criticize, and the people in the articles that you make them out to be stupid and they can't take care of themselves, therefore we should be in charge of every aspect of their lives through government. I said, you won't believe it. There are people who are actually normal. They're actually funnier than us, and they're not as uptight. It's really weird. I go, yeah, and they're not snobs. That was when I started to realize, and they're like, no, you're wrong about those people. They're ignorant and they're horrible. I'm like, something's wrong with this picture. And so my war that I'm is with my neighbors and with my fellow journalists. It's an awkward lifestyle, I gotta be honest with you, living in Hollywood and fighting the Hollywood left, residing in the realm of journalism and doing this type of stuff and fighting the people that I have to deal with. But to me, it's the most important battle out there. I've tried to analyze it. I've tried to figure out where politics is more important. It's not. These people create the firewall by which we cannot inform our fellow citizen to be able to make decisions on how we should govern ourselves. This is how they control us. And we have finally figured it out, and the new media is the means by which we can actually not just start to govern ourselves and start telling horrific truths about our political peril and our financial peril, because the press didn't report on these things, but we can also now change the equation, and we can begin to start changing the narratives. And when you see something like this, Kate Zernicki, or Carol Leanig of the Washington Post, when the Acorn story began, you wanted the Acorn stuff, so I'll give you the Acorn stuff. When the Acorn story began, and James and Hannah, when James came to me, Hannah did, and I met her later in New York, I said, whew, this is divine providence here that you would find me. Why did James choose to go to a guy who works out of a basement in Los Angeles and not go to Pinch Sulzberger? Because he knew that if he saw the Acorn tapes, that he would kill the story. He knew that if he went to CBS, that would happen as well. In fact, I did go to ABC to a reporter there, and the person said in confidence, I'm not going to give the person's name, that we can't do this story because of the underlying politics of it. I just did it just to test my theory, because that's what I did. I tried to get this story out there using as much media skills as I possibly could, because I didn't want it just to be on big government. I wanted every website to see it, including the Huffington Post, because once you see what happened in the Acorn offices, a fundamental narrative that the mainstream media buys into, in fact, it grants them their sense of moral superiority over the rest of us, is they believe in social justice, and they believe in economic equality. And these are the great things that when you ask these people who claim to have gotten into it for the, because they wanted to be an objective journalist, will out of the other side of their mouth say, well, I got into it because of social justice and economic equality. And it's obviously a contradiction. And that's why they glommed on to Barack Obama. Uh-oh, racial tones. These people have such a patronizing attitude towards black people in this country. They should be ashamed of themselves. And we're your protectors. You can't take care of yourself. We'll take care of you. Well, I went to college in New Orleans, and you're not taking, no, I'm sorry, your systems are not working. And so for we crazy conservatives, comma in racial tones, for we crazy conservatives that look at the Great Society and go, that sucked. On those Acorn tapes, when I saw the first one, I thought, that's tremendously weird. That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Do you see that, James? Did you see those two people didn't bat an eye when you said you wanted to create an underage prostitution ring? Underage. But James is an artist. He admitted he's an artist. He's not a real journalist. Oh, then it's not real. Then what happened on those tapes didn't happen. He's an activist. Ooh, then we shouldn't pay attention to what's on those tapes. They're still not looking at what we put out there, the full transcripts and full audio. And I've said to Media Matters, I've said to John Podesta, who investigated us in the form of a lawsuit, I've said I'll sit there and I'll watch the entire videos with you, and we'll have a Q&A with the American people afterwards. They will not do it because they cannot be held to account for the fact that they didn't cover it after it happened. They acknowledged it happened, and then they walked away. They acknowledged it existed because we crafted a strategy to force them to say it existed. And then the New York Times says, okay, we admitted that it existed. We're going to create systems in the future to make sure that these stories don't, that we'll pay attention to them. There was no one looking into what do these tapes mean. These two ladies in the first Baltimore one didn't bat an eye when they said 14-year-old girls, when they said that they were going to bring them over the border illegally and put them into houses. They said, let me bring in my tax specialist. And have you ever gotten so excited that you go like this? Like, you're like, oh my gosh, love at first sight. They were so excited to meet this young street entrepreneurs that they were like, oh, you've got to meet these people. They're fantastic. It wasn't just one. It was the most fantastical thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And do you think if that tape were of the NRA being caught on tape, teaching people how to take legal guns and making them into automatic rifles, and somebody came in and said, hey, I'm a Southern guy, and I want to do this, and I'm gonna make an automatic rifle, and I want to go shoot up some schools in the inner city. And is there a chance in the world that 6 months later those tapes wouldn't have been investigated? There wouldn't be a Rolling Stone and Vanity Fair portrait of what those tapes mean, that they wouldn't call them the Abu Ghraib of the NRA. That is why when Carol Leanig of the Washington Post called me up, when the story was when we basically forced them to acknowledge the story existed, Carol Leanig called me up, and I said to her, I'm interviewing you too, because I don't trust you. And she said, so what did you think of the first tape? I said, I thought it was very weird. What did you think when you saw the rest of them? I said, let me think about that. I thought they were the Abu Ghraib of the Great Society. That's what I said. For a fact, I had totally thought that one through. I was very happy that she asked. And she said, that's not right. I said, excuse me? What do you mean it's not right? She goes, I resent that. I worked on the Abu Ghraib story. at the Washington Post. I said, "You asked me a question. Who else do you banter with? Who else?" It's only with right-wingers that they feel the need to push back when we state our opinions, because they're in this racket for social change and economic justice. And so this, just like the climate change thing, hit on their fundamental religion. I live in West LA. I live in Brentwood. I go to Whole Foods to get wine every day. I do. Not every day, but I know these people. The two things that they hold on to more than anything is environmentalism has filled their void for their secularism, and their moral superiority on race issues. And that's why I was a liberal growing up. And when I saw what a crap system they created, I said, I want nothing to do with this. I don't care if my neighbors and my own family members poo-poo me or say that I'm, Satan, which they do. I'm like, this is disgusting. This is disgusting what's on these tapes. They were systemic. In all of the videos, in all of the cities, we were truthful. We said, look, there's one guy by the name of Felix Harris in the Los Angeles Acorn office who, in the very public foyer, sort of, in the main area of the Acorn office in Los Angeles, I think James was getting a little bit cocky here, and he's like, "Hi, I'm prostitution ring. Let's create it now." Like I think he was too aggressive, perhaps, because the guy's like almost startled and said, "I can basically just help you fill out forms." He didn't kick him out. He didn't call the police. Those were two things that Acorn's Bertha Lewis over and over and over and over told the media. They got kicked out of dozens of offices, and the police were called. The media kept buying that lie. The media even invited Bertha Lewis to the National Press Club, and they introduced her, Jonathan Salant, who was the former president of the National Press Club, and he of Bloomberg, basically treated her like she was a dignitary from a sacrosanct social justice organization. It was just unbelievable. I'm thinking, this lady has made the press look so stupid because every step of the way that we put a new video out there, she's gone out there and offered up a lie that the next video disproved. And they invite her to speak at the National Press Club. Hannah and James were asked to answer for what they did at the press club, and Hannah and James said, "We'd like for Andrew to go to the National Press Club," and they said, "Sorry, he can't go." That's because they knew that I would make the National Press Club the speech, the talk, a referendum. And I'd say, I'm willing to take questions from any one of you in the room, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, but you need to be honest with me, and they won't. And their racket is imploding at the exact same time that ClimateGate happened. And their concept in the Messiah in Obama, that's crumbling. They'll never be able to recreate that type of comical, overwhelming, larger than life. Bush is the worst thing that's ever happened to the earth, and this is the best thing that's ever happened to the earth. What an amazing coincidence. Why don't we? He'll solve everything. And even they are noticing the jarring juxtaposition. So we, at the forefront of new media who are out there fighting this battle, are fighting the journalists, because the second you knock down that wall, you don't understand. It's the promised land. It will be the United States of America again. So come on in. The water is warm. Start filming these people. When you're being interviewed by a journalist, film them back. Use it. And use Retracto, the correction alpaca, at Big Journalism, because he will get your retractions, because these people are being held to account for the first time ever. Thank you very much. Yeah. Only guy a hug.
Well, I guess I was right. Andrew was more than up to the task. We really appreciate that. As we wrap up, we have one more special award tonight. This individual does not know they're getting this award, so. But this individual is someone who is near and dear to my heart. He's a longtime friend of my father's, has contributed often to the AIM report in the past, and I think he deserves the award just on the basis that he was a conservative buried at CBS Radio for years. So I want to award this special little award here to Wes Vernon for his great contribution to freedom's cause and promotion of accurate and balanced and honest news reporting. So Wes, come up here for this award.
I'm speechless. But I've got to tell you this, after Marc Morano, Andrew Breitbart, and by the way, Andrew, I still miss your column in the Washington Times, so I want to get it elsewhere. I don't want to miss it. And I thank you very much. I mean, there's so much that AIM has done. Reed and now Don and Cliff, Roger. It's a wonderful group. And they are following along in the footsteps of the founding father, Reed himself, because they do not sacrifice their integrity one bit. And that has won Reed a lot and has won the whole organization, Accuracy in Media, why they are so effective in spotlighting and pinpointing what is wrong with the old crumbling mainstream media. Thank you very much.
Right. I want to thank everyone for attending today. Just hope you enjoyed that. And just as housekeeping reminders, please, join our Facebook fan page, follow AIM on Twitter, follow me on Twitter. I think you'll enjoy it. We try to be very aggressive with what we do, and as we create and help promote the conservative cause through the new media. Thank you.